There's a moment when you realize that every word you've ever spoken in your own defense was a confession of weakness. Every explanation you've offered was a gift to your enemies. Every time you bled emotionally when questioned, every time you rushed to clarify your intentions, every desperate attempt to be understood, you were handing them the knife to carve you deeper. The greatest conquest isn't external. It isn't territory or treasure or the bending of others to your will. The greatest conquest is internal, the mastery of your own impulses, the impulse to explain, the impulse to defend, the impulse to be seen, to be validated, to be comprehended by minds that were never worthy of your truth in the first place. You've been operating from a position of vulnerability your entire life, bleeding information, bleeding emotion, bleeding power with every word. But there's another way to exist, a way that doesn't require their understanding or their approval, a way that transforms your very silence into a weapon more terrifying than any argument you could construct. Consider the nature of true power. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't explain its methods. It doesn't seek permission or validation. Power simply is, and in its being, it creates a gravitational field that bends everything around it. You've been trying to convince people of your worth instead of making them feel the weight of your presence. You've been explaining your moves instead of letting your results speak in languages they're too small to interpret. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, but he went deeper than most realize. He understood that the most exquisite fear comes not from obvious threats, but from the unknown. From the person who watches without revealing, who acts without explaining, who wins without celebrating, the person who remains a complete enigma even as they reshape the world around them. Here's exactly how this transforms your reality. When someone attacks you publicly, and they will, because mediocrity always attacks excellence, you don't defend, you don't explain, you don't even acknowledge the attack directly. Instead, you pause. 3 seconds of deliberate silence while you look at them with the expression of someone trying to remember where they've seen this person before. Then you say, "Interesting perspective," and move the conversation forward as if they've just commented on the weather. Your tone suggests you've filed their outburst away for future reference, but you're far too busy with important matters to address it now. Watch what this does. The attacker expected a fight. They prepared for your defense, your counter-argument, your emotional reaction. Instead, they're left holding a weapon with no target. Worse, they've revealed their own desperation, while you've revealed nothing. Every person watching now sees the contrast between someone who felt compelled to attack and someone who couldn't be bothered to engage with such a small concern. But this goes deeper than social dynamics. This is about fundamental transformation, the version of you that used to explain and defend and bleed. That person dies here. What emerges is something they've never encountered before, someone who operates by entirely different rules. In professional settings, when they question your methods or challenge your expertise, you don't provide the detailed breakdown they're fishing for. Instead, you deliver results that speak languages they don't understand. When they ask how you achieved something seemingly impossible, you say, "I approached it differently," and let the mystery expand their imagination far beyond what your actual process could inspire. Their minds will construct theories about your capabilities that are far more impressive than any explanation you could offer. The most sophisticated practitioners of this art understand that people's imagination of your power will always exceed the reality of your methods, but only if you never give them enough information to construct a complete picture. You become a puzzle they cannot solve, and unsolved puzzles occupy far more mental real estate than solved ones. This extends into intimate relationships with devastating effectiveness. When your partner accuses you of being distant or secretive, when they demand to know what you're thinking, when they try to emotional excavate your inner world, you don't comply. not out of cruelty, but out of preservation of something far more valuable than their temporary comfort, your autonomy. You say, "I'm exactly where I need to be," and the conversation shifts to their need to control your internal landscape rather than any actual issue with your behavior. The weak explain their emotions. The strong create emotional experiences. When you stop explaining your moods, your thoughts, your daily internal weather reports, something magical happens. Your emotional states become events rather than explanations. Your rare smiles become treasures. Your attention becomes a gift they must earn rather than a right they can claim. But here's where it transcends mere technique and becomes philosophy. Machiavelli wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be, but few experience what you really are. Most people live their entire lives in the appearance, constantly performing their identity, constantly explaining their performance, constantly seeking validation for their act. You're going to stop performing entirely. You're going to become. The practical application requires precision. When they say, "You never tell me anything," you don't defend your level of communication or explain your need for privacy. You look at them with genuine curiosity and say, "What would you like to know?" Then, regardless of what they ask, you provide exactly one layer of information. Never the whole picture, never the emotional context, never the strategic reasoning. Always leave them with more questions than answers. This isn't about being deliberately obtuse or cruel. This is about recognizing that people's hunger for your complete transparency is actually a hunger for control over your narrative. They want to understand you so they can predict you, influence you, manipulate you. When you stop feeding that hunger, you stop being prey. Watch how this reshapes every interaction. In business meetings, when they ask for your opinion on a controversial topic, you don't provide a politically safe response or a carefully hedged statement. You say something like, "I have thoughts on this," and let the silence that follows do the work. Their minds immediately begin constructing theories about what those thoughts might be, and theories are always more powerful than revelations. The beauty of this approach is that it scales infinitely. The more important the stakes, the more powerful your restraint becomes. When they're gossiping about company changes and fishing for your insider knowledge, you don't correct their misinformation or share what you know. You simply listen with the expression of someone who finds their theories incomplete. Your silence suggests depths of understanding they cannot fathom, and that suggestion is worth more than any actual information you could provide. In social media interactions, this becomes an art form. When they attack you publicly, seeking to provoke a response that will generate engagement and drama, you don't take the bait. Instead, you wait exactly 24 hours, then post something completely unrelated that demonstrates success, growth, or achievement. No reference to the attack, no acknowledgement of the controversy, just evidence that you've been operating on a level where their criticism is background noise. This drives them to escalate, which only makes them look more desperate while you appear increasingly untouchable. They wanted to drag you into the mud. Instead, they're screaming at someone who's already moved to higher ground. The advanced practitioner understands that your mystique is your fortress. Every detail you reveal about your process, your struggles, your internal world, these aren't gifts to your audience. They're weapons you're handing to your enemies. The people who love you will love the mystery. The people who hate you will be frustrated by it. The people who want to use you will be confounded by it. But this goes beyond tactical advantages. This is about reclaiming your essential nature. You weren't born to be understood by everyone. You weren't created to be an open book that any passing stranger could read and comprehend. You were designed to be a work of art so complex that only the most sophisticated observers could appreciate its full depth. When they say you're hard to read, you don't clarify or explain or make yourself more accessible. You smile the smile of someone who considers that the highest compliment they could receive. When they say you're mysterious, you don't demystify yourself. You embrace the mystery as your natural state. Here's a specific scenario that will test your commitment to this path. You're in a relationship where your partner accuses you of emotional unavailability. The old you would launch into explanations about your communication style, your childhood, your fear of vulnerability. The transformed you says, "I'm available for what matters," and lets them figure out what that means. If they push for clarification, you add, "You'll know when you encounter it," and the conversation moves to their expectations rather than your deficiencies. This isn't about being withholding out of spite. This is about recognizing that people who truly deserve access to your inner world will demonstrate that worthiness through their actions, not their demands. The people who insist on immediate emotional transparency are often the least equipped to handle the weight of your actual thoughts and feelings. In professional contexts, when colleagues try to understand your strategic thinking or your long-term plans, you don't provide roadmaps for them to copy or sabotage. You say things like, "I prefer to let my work speak for itself," or "Time will reveal the pattern." These responses suggest depth and planning without revealing your actual methodology. Your colleagues will attribute far more sophistication to your approach than any explanation could convey. The person who masters this art becomes a different category of human being entirely. They're not playing the same game as everyone else because they've changed the rules. While others are fighting for attention, they command it through scarcity. While others are seeking understanding, they create fascination through mystery. While others are explaining their value, they demonstrate it through results that speak languages the mediocre cannot interpret. Machiavelli wrote that the vulgar crowd follows appearances, and the few judge by the outcome. You're going to stop caring about the vulgar crowd entirely. Your focus shifts to outcomes, to results, to the tangible transformation of your reality through methods that remain your private property. When someone asks how you achieved something remarkable, you don't provide the step-by-step breakdown they're seeking. You say something like, "Different problems require different approaches," and let them wonder what that approach might have been. Their imagination will construct methodologies far more impressive than your actual process, and those imagined methodologies become part of your reputation. This extends into digital spaces with devastating effectiveness. Your social media presence becomes curated mystique rather than transparent documentation. You don't share your daily struggles, your process shots, your behind-the-scenes vulnerability. You share outcomes, results, evidence of transformation without the blueprint for replication. When people ask about your process in the comments, you don't respond with detailed explanations. You like a few thoughtful comments and ignore the rest. Your silence suggests that your methods are either too advanced for general consumption or too proprietary to share casually. Both interpretations serve your interests. The transformation requires you to death, to your need for validation through understanding. The people who matter will respect your boundaries. The people who don't respect your boundaries don't matter. The people who demand immediate access to your complete inner world are announcing their intention to consume rather than appreciate. But here's where it becomes dangerous. Dangerous to them, advantageous to you. When you stop explaining yourself, people have to judge you based on results alone. When your results consistently exceed their ability to explain them, you begin to exist in their minds as something beyond their current understanding of what's possible. This isn't about creating fake mystique or artificial scarcity. This is about recognizing that your authentic self is already more complex and sophisticated than any explanation could capture. When you stop trying to make yourself understood and start letting yourself be experienced, people encounter the full weight of your presence rather than the edited version you used to provide. In romantic relationships, this transforms the entire dynamic. Instead of being the person who over-communicates to prevent misunderstandings, you become the person whose presence is so compelling that misunderstandings resolve themselves. Instead of explaining your love, you demonstrate it through actions that require no interpretation. Instead of verbally processing every emotion, you create emotional experiences that transcend language. The people who can handle this level of engagement with mystery and depth, these are your people. The people who need constant explanation and emotional hand-holding, these were never your people. You were just trying to make yourself small enough for their comfort, and in doing so, you were betraying your own nature. When they accuse you of being cold or calculating, you don't defend your warmth or explain your emotional availability. You simply demonstrate whatever level of connection feels authentic in that moment, and let them adjust their expectations accordingly. Your emotional expression becomes a gift you give when inspired, not a performance you provide on demand. Advanced practitioners understand that this approach creates a filter that automatically separates superficial people from substantial ones. The superficial demand immediate transparency because they're seeking entertainment or control. The substantial respect your depth because they recognize it as a mirror of their own complexity. But this goes beyond interpersonal dynamics. This is about reclaiming your relationship with your own power. Every time you explained yourself, you were giving others permission to judge your choices. Every time you defended your actions, you were accepting their authority to question them. Every time you sought their understanding, you were making their comprehension a prerequisite for your self-worth. That person, the one who needed others to understand in order to feel valid, that person is dead now. What emerges is someone who acts from internal authority, someone whose choices are self-validating, someone whose worth isn't subject to external evaluation because it doesn't require external confirmation. When they say you've changed, you don't explain the transformation or defend your evolution. You say, everything changes, with the tone of someone stating an obvious truth about the nature of existence. When they say they don't recognize you anymore, you look at them with the expression of someone wondering why they expected permanence in a universe built on transformation. This isn't about becoming cold or disconnected. This is about becoming selective. Your warmth becomes a treasure rather than a constant temperature. Your attention becomes a gift rather than a guaranteed service. Your emotional availability becomes an event rather than a standing policy. The practical applications extend into every domain of human interaction. In professional settings, when clients or colleagues try to negotiate your rates or question your value, you don't justify your pricing or explain your worth. You say something like, "These are the terms for this level of service," and let them decide if they're ready for what you provide. Your confidence in your value makes their objections seem like personal limitations rather than market realities. In social situations, when people try to extract gossip or personal information, you don't provide the entertainment they're seeking. You listen with the expression of someone who finds their curiosity interesting. Your silence suggests depths of knowledge they cannot access, and that suggestion is often more valuable than any actual information you could share. The person you're becoming operates by different rules entirely. While others compete for attention, you command it through scarcity. While others seek approval, you generate curiosity through mystery. While others explain their value, you demonstrate it through results that require no interpretation. Machiavelli understood that the most sophisticated power operates through suggestion rather than declaration. The prince who must constantly assert his authority has already lost it. The person who must explain their importance has already diminished it. The individual who must defend their worth has already accepted its negotiability. You're stepping into a different category entirely. Not better or worse than others. That's still comparative thinking. Different. Operating by different principles, pursuing different objectives, measuring success by different metrics. While they're fighting for understanding, you're creating experiences. While they're seeking validation, you're building realities. When people try to analyze your behavior or predict your next move, they're working with incomplete information by design. They see the outcomes, but not the methodology. They experience the results, but not the process. They encounter the effect, but not the cause. This incomplete picture forces them to fill in the gaps with their imagination, and imagination always inflates capability beyond reality. The advanced practitioner doesn't just withhold information, they curate mystique. Every revelation is strategic. Every glimpse behind the curtain is calculated to enhance rather than diminish the overall mystery. They understand that partial information is more powerful than complete transparency because it engages the observer's creativity rather than satisfying their curiosity. This extends into digital spaces where your online presence becomes a carefully orchestrated symphony of suggestion rather than documentation. You don't share your daily routine or your process struggles or your moment-by-moment emotional weather reports. You share outcomes, transformations, evidence of growth without the blueprint for replication. When people ask about your methods in comments or messages, you don't provide detailed tutorials or step-by-step breakdowns. You acknowledge their interest without satisfying it. You might say something like, "Glad it resonated," or "Different approaches work for different people," responses that demonstrate warmth without revealing strategy. The transformation is complete when explaining yourself feels as foreign as performing someone else's personality. When their demands for transparency feel like requests for you to diminish yourself for their comfort. When their inability to understand you feels like their limitation rather than your failure to communicate clearly enough. You're not trying to be understood anymore. You're not trying to be liked. You're not trying to be anything for anyone except authentically, unapologetically yourself. And that self, the real one, not the edited version you used to provide for public consumption. That self is more complex and powerful than any explanation could capture. The people who can handle the full intensity of your presence without requiring you to dim it for their comfort, these are your people. The people who need you to be smaller, more predictable, more easily categorized, these were never your people. You were just trying to fit into spaces too small for your actual dimensions. When they say you're intimidating, you don't soften yourself or apologize for your intensity. You recognize that intimidation is often how small people experience greatness, and you're not responsible for managing their comfort with your authentic presence. When they say you're too much, you understand that too much is often code for more than I can handle, and you're not interested in relationships that require you to be less than you are. This isn't about becoming aggressive or hostile. This is about becoming selective. Your energy becomes a resource you invest wisely rather than a utility you provide freely. Your attention becomes a gift you give when inspired rather than a service you perform on demand. Your emotional availability becomes an event you create rather than a constant state you maintain. But here's where it gets truly dangerous for them and advantageous for you. When you stop explaining your decisions, people have to judge you based on outcomes alone. When your outcomes consistently exceed their ability to predict or explain them, you begin to exist in their minds as something beyond their current framework for understanding human capability. You become not just misunderstood, but misunderstood by design, not just mysterious, but strategically enigmatic. Not just private, but selectively transparent in ways that enhance rather than diminish your overall mystique. The final stage of this transformation is when silence becomes your native language and words become a foreign tongue you speak only when absolutely necessary. When your presence communicates more than your explanations ever could. When your results speak languages they don't understand and your methods remain your private property. They wanted to understand you, so they could control you, predict you, influence you. Instead, you've become something they've never encountered before. Someone who operates by entirely different rules. Someone who measures success by internal metrics rather than external validation. Someone whose worth isn't subject to their evaluation because it doesn't require their confirmation. The loud ones are seen, the reckless ones are feared. But you've transcended both visibility and fear. You operate in that space beyond their current understanding of what's possible, where by the time they finally comprehend what you've been doing, what you're capable of, what you've already accomplished, it's too late to stop you. Because power that operates in mystery is power that operates without permission, without explanation, without the burden of being understood by minds too small to comprehend its true dimensions.